The head of the investigating Directorate against corruption, that's Advocate Andrea Johnson, is expected to continue her testimony at the Madlanga Commission today. Now, this is following a tense appearance where she invoked her right against self-incrimination. She declined to answer key questions linked to allegations of leaking a confidential police docket, telling the Commission the matter is now before the National Prosecuting Authority. Johnson is said to face further questioning as the inquiry probes alleged interference in high-profile investigations and claims of corruption within the crime intelligence. For the latest on developments at the Madlanga Commission, we cross live to SABC News anchor Ayanda Nyati, who's alongside senior reporter Kenny Maphanga, all at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. Pardon me. A very good morning to you, Ayanda. So quite a difficult day at the office yesterday for Ms. Johnson, but she opted to invoke her constitutional right to not incriminate herself insofar as it relates to the allegation that she forwarded the contents of a docket to Feroz Khan. But also when questioned around the Section 27 affidavit, I was listening to Commissioner Khumalo. Sandile Khumalo quizzed her that how does it happen that you have an investigator in the form of Colonel Padayachi saying he never caught sight of the Section 27 affidavit, but this is a gentleman that must go on to investigate the matter when they didn't catch sight of the very complaint in its original form?
Yeah, that's right, Mfund. It's interesting you describe day one as being a difficult one because we haven't even gotten to the point where the commissioners essentially start their more inquisitorial posture and approach to the testimony as it continues. But we certainly expect that at 9:30, Andrea Johnson will be back on the grill, as they say. And as you mentioned, Advocate Sandile Khumalo, at a different stage of the testimony yesterday, he essentially asked Andrea Johnson to let the Commission in on how she approached the sub judice rule, as it were, when she appeared before the ad hoc committee a couple of weeks ago. Perhaps it's a good place for us to start before we essentially go via piecemeal through the rest of what we heard yesterday. So let's take you back to that moment where Advocate Khumalo asked Andrea Johnson whether the sub judice rule that Andrea Johnson cited here was cited when she appeared before parliamentarians at the ad hoc committee. Take a listen.
My understanding is that you testified in the ad hoc committee sometime late last year?
That is correct, sir.
Yes, and you testified in relation to the same issues?
Yes.
What was IDAC's attitude to the sub judice rule in the ad hoc committee? Did you adopt the same attitude, or were you comfortable to testify about the same issues?
I must go back into my record, but I seem to think I did raise it, but had to still answer it. I just speak under correction. I don't have that exact, did we raise the sub judice and it was overruled, or I answered the question.
So there you have it, Andrea Johnson really kicking for touch when she was essentially asked whether or not she's been consistent in how she responded to that committee and how she is responding to this inquiry, which, as you know, is constituted under the president's powers. Kenny Maphanga is our senior reporter who's listened to day one of that testimony and joins us now live. And Kenny, I suppose the commissioners in that questioning were building up to something, right? That, if she was able to answer questions about Feroz Khan and the allegations against her in that setting, she should be able to do it in this one too.
Absolutely, and that's the difficulty with the exercise that is set to take off this morning, which is I call it the cross-examination, but the Commission's bench likes to say the more probing questions. And she submitted 3 statements, but the first and the third, which is really what the Commission is interested in, it's very limited in what she's offered to the Commission. We do know that Brian Padayachi went into quite great detail of his investigation into the appointment of Brigadier Mukwele. However, as the IDAC head, adding to that, Padayachi actually placed the blame squarely on the prosecutors and the executive team because he says that's where it starts and ends, and he just comes in to gather the facts and then give it to them for a decision. So essentially she says that although she defends the matter and says that there's a prima facie case rather against them, she doesn't want to go into details of the merits of the case, citing that it's sub judice. But we do know that during the ad hoc, to some extent, she answered questions about the appointment of Brigadier Mukwele, and she's even done an interview in the media about this case, saying that it's not an HR matter, that it's a corruption matter. So what was okay to discuss there and then becomes an issue here before the Madlanga Commission? Is it because the allegations here are a bit tougher than what was before the other platforms, and these are serious allegations that she has to answer to, and to some extent they're being linked to her past actions or alleged actions as a senior public prosecutor, because at the very least it has been established that to some extent the complaint about the appointment of Brigadier Mukwele is allegedly about Major General Faraz Khan not being included in the panel. And if you look at that and the previous conduct that also allegedly places her in close proximity to Khan in terms of allegedly providing a shield for him by giving him that docket, which could have been seen as a means to advantage him, or at least allow him to allegedly tailor his evidence to that complaint made against him. If you put the two together, it then finds meaning. Perhaps that's why the witness doesn't want to go further into these details. Well, she cites sub judice in the one, and then in the other matter, she says that she wants to invoke her rights against self-incrimination. There's also a challenge there, because the evidence leaders are contrasting that with the NPA Act and what self-incrimination means there, that you can't just give a blanket refusal to not answer questions. And it's something that she had to ponder on overnight and get back to the Commission as to how they take it forward. These are two major issues that need to be ventilated in quite great detail in order to get an understanding of where IDAC fits in these allegations and whether or not there's an intention or kind of motive, allegedly, by Advocate Andrea Johnson in that regard. Without testing those two statements, I'm not sure how far you can get with her particular evidence. So if it's going to be a situation where this is sub judice and I'm invoking my right against self-incrimination, well then what really can the Commission get down to today, as it is expected to get to those hard probing questions?
Absolutely, and we've seen other witnesses also essentially take a similar posture, and how the commissioners have responded to that, suggesting at some stage that they weren't being helpful at all. The genesis of what we've heard, at least the genesis of this commission, comes from Ntantla Mkhwanazi's July briefing, and part of the allegation he made at that stage is that IDAC essentially is being used as an institution to weaponize fictional battles within the SAPS, and more specifically that Dumisani Khumalo is being targeted. Yesterday, Andrea Johnson told this commission that just moments before the very same Dumisani Khumalo was arrested, she had a death threat sent to her cell phone. Take a listen.
I cannot end this affidavit without pointing out the adverse effects that I personally have had to endure since the arrest immediately just before the arrest of Lieutenant General Khumalo and co-accused was effected before June 2025, before 26 June 2025.
May I suggest, I think
we have a correction.
Yes.
There's a typo. Have had to endure since the arrest.
I think it's all since,
had
not
to endure
of.
Since the arrest of. Have had to endure since the arrest of.
Since the arrest, or since immediately just before the arrest.
Yes.
So it makes sense to me when I replace the of with all.
Yes.
I think that was what was intended.
Correct.
Thank you.
Was affected before 26 June. I received a death threat directly on my cell phone. It read, Mrs. IDAC, you and your guys Shabalala, Perumal, Padiachi, and Belochin have went too far. You're going to wish you did not. I think everyone that has a document can read that word.
Yes.
With us, get body bags ready, close quote.
All right, so there you have it. Andrea Johnson essentially saying that there's been a cost even to her personal life after she pursued that particular case. And Kenny, let me bring you back in here, because now we have an interesting scenario where on the one hand we're told that Dumisani Khumalo was being targeted. On the other, Andrea Johnson is, I suppose, painting a picture that she's touched an untouchable. Those are certainly my words, it's not what she said.
Indeed, and she can't advance the sentiments stated in the statement that she puts before the Commission without actually getting into the operational methods and what is contained or the elements that were used to trigger this investigation. And no matter how much she skirts around this particular topic, it's going to have to go there, because the answers in whether or not this was malicious or was this a legitimate pursuit of justice falls in that first, the Section 27 referral, did it even meet the requirements? Because she seemingly tries to suggest that she since removed herself from the matter, but I don't think she has the powers to even make such a suggestion before the Madlanga Commission. But at least when it started and it was allocated to the team, there wasn't this controversy yet. So she would have been to some extent involved in the case of the appointment of Brigadier Mokwele. And it's important for the Commission to get answers on those flaws in the operational methods that were uncovered by Brian Parayachi. Even if you start at his contention that he never had sight of the Section 27 referral affidavit, which really gives birth to the investigation, that already in itself is a red flag that the Mr. Paramore as well as Advocate Andrea Johnson will have to answer to. And it's not going to be enough to state that this was not a malicious prosecution or there was no political interference, when the real answers lie in the operational methods and the elements contained in the docket itself. And that is the approach that the Commission took itself when it went through this investigation with Brian Parayachi and then uncovered the flaws in the investigation that raised red flags about whether or not these were allegedly manufactured charges and whether there is allegedly another motive behind this particular prosecution. So you can't have it both ways. If this defense is going to be put forth, then you're going to have to deal with the elements of the docket itself and the Section 27 referral and the flaws that emanate out of that particular evidence. You won't be able to be silent on one while proclaiming the other. So it's going to be an interesting day as we try to understand how the Commission is going to take this forward, because one cannot be discussed without the other.
Absolutely. If everything is above board, you must be able to lay everything on the table, so to speak. But you speak about, those questions around some kind of interference and how interesting day two is going to be. And Andrea Johnson, I see, has now walked into the room, clad today in a green dress, it appears. And as we take in those visuals, let's also take you back to part of her statement yesterday where she denied that there was any political interference in the arrest of Dumisani Khumalo and his co-accused. Take a listen.
I deny these allegations. I expand on this denial as follows hereunder. 11.1. IDAC has a prima facie criminal case against Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo and other officials at Crime Intelligence. That matter was not pursued for any political purpose at the instance of any political actor or to advance any form of political interference within SABC. 11.2. The investigation and prosecution have at all material times been dealt with through the ordinary prosecutorial processes applicable within IDAC and the NPA. The matter is presently before a court of law. In those circumstances, and because representations submitted by the accused are under consideration by the prosecution team, it would be inappropriate for me in this affidavit to address the merits of the prosecution, the strength or content of the evidence, the contents of any docket, or any matter that may properly fall for determination by the court or the prosecution team.
And there you have it. You heard there Andrea Johnson saying she can't go into the details surrounding the evidence that has been presented. But, I suppose wants the Commission to just believe that the evidence was enough for there to be some kind of possible cause for prosecution. I imagine, Kenny, the commissioners they're not going to take that at face value, are they?
Absolutely not, because the main allegation is that this case was part of an alleged fight back against Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo and other generals within crime intelligence. Unfortunately, it's not a subject that she's going to be able to avoid today as they continue to probe her three statements in this regard.
All right, and thank you very much indeed, Kenny Maplanga, our senior reporter here at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. And as you've just heard, Jeremy Michaels, the spokesperson of the Commission, has called the room to order. The commissioners are now walking in as Andrea Johnson's second day on the stand begins now.